Hello everyone, today we are going to discuss about the topic design of an experiment. What do you mean by a design of an experiment? The design of an experiment is the design of any task that aims to describe and explain the variation of information under conditions that are hypothesized to reflect the variation. The term is generally associated with experiments in which the design introduces conditions that directly affect the variation, but may also refer to the design of a quasi-experiment in which natural conditions that influence the variation are selected for observation. In its simplest form, an experiment aims at predicting the outcome by introducing a change of the preconditions, which is represented by one or more independent variables, also referred to as input variables or predictor variables. The change in one or more independent variables is generally hypothesized to result in a change in one or more dependent variables, also referred to as output variable or response variable. The experimental design may also identify control variables that must be held constant to prevent external factors from affecting the results. Experimental designs involves not only the selection of suitable independent, dependent and control variables, but planning of the delivery of the experiment under statistically optimal conditions given the constraints of available resources. There are multiple approaches of determining the set of design points to use in the experiment. Main concerns in experimental design include the establishment of validity, reliability, and replicability. For example, these concerns can be particularly addressed by carefully choosing the independent variables, reducing the risk of measurement error, and ensuring that the documentation of the method is sufficiently detailed. Related concerns include achieving appropriate levels of statistical power and sensitivity. The methodology for designing experiment is based on certain principles or guidelines. They include comparison, randomization, replication, blocking, orthogonality, and factorial experimentation. False positive conclusion, often resulting from the pressure to publish or the author's own confirmation bias, are an inherent hazard in many fields. A good way to prevent the disease potentially leading to false positive in the data collection phase to use double blind design. When a double blind design is used, participants are randomly assigned to experimental groups, but the researchers is unaware of what participants belong to which group. Therefore, the researchers cannot affect the participants' response to the intervention. Experimental design with undisclosed degree of freedom are a problem. This can lead to conspicuous or unconspicuous p-hacking. In a true experiment, researchers can have an experimental group, which is where their intervention testing the hypothesis is implemented, and a control group which has all the same element as the experimental group without the interventional element. Thus, when every else except from one intervention is held constant, researchers can certify with some certainty that this one element is what caused the observed change. In some instances, having a control group is not ethical. This is sometimes solved by using two different experimental groups. In pure experimental design, the dependent variable is manipulated by the researchers. That is, every participant of the research is chosen randomly from the population, and each participant chosen is assigned randomly to condition of the independent variable. Only when this is done is it possible to certify with high probability that the reason for the difference in the outcome variables are caused by the different conditions. Therefore, the researchers should choose the experimental design over other design type whenever possible. However, the nature of the independent variables does not always allow for manipulation. Statistical control. It is the best that a process be in reasonable statistical control prior to conducting designed experiments. When this is not possible, proper blocking, replication, and randomization allow for the careful conduct of designed experiment. To control for nuisance variables, researchers institute control checks or additional measures. Investigators should ensure that uncontrolled influence do not skew the findings of the study. A manipulation check is one example of a control check. Manipulation check allow investigators to isolate the chief variables to strengthen support that these variables are operating as planned. Human participants' constraints, laws, and ethical considerations preclude some carefully designed experiments with human subjects. Legal constraints are dependent on jurisdiction. Constraints may involve institutional review boards, informed consents, and confidentially affecting both clinical trials and behavioral and social science experiments. In the field of toxicology, for example, experimentation is performed on laboratory animals with the goal of defining safe exposure limits for humans. Balancing the constraints are viewed from the medical field. Thank you.